to your incredible panel here. Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, Chief of the Defence Staff of the United Kingdom, 2021 to 2025. You're also on the Security Forum here, aren't you? That's good. Taavi Rõivas, Prime Minister of Estonia from 2014 to 2016. Delighted to have you here. Admiral Rob Bauer, Chair of who's been busy signing books. I hope you've got one. Be signing books later again? Yes. Chair of the NATO Military Committee, 2021 to 2025. Irene Fellin, NATO Secretary General, Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security and Human Security. And joining us live, as you may be able to see, Baiba Braže, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Latvia. Great to have you with us. We're going to do the same thing. 3 questions that we'll all answer with brief answers, please, so we can just get the sense of all your thoughts on all these incredible topics. The first question, whether Russia is preparing to expand its aggression beyond Ukraine. We're going to pick up on where we left off. And are NATO and Europe truly ready to deter and respond if the war spills over? We're then going to ask, does the evolving policy of the United States, including the risk of reduced engagement and strategic ambiguity, create new vulnerabilities for Ukraine and European security? And then how should we assess China's role in this war? We heard from Sir Richard there, and we want to pick up on that a little bit later. Minister Braže, is Russia preparing to expand its aggression beyond Ukraine, and are NATO and Europe ready to deter and respond if the war spills over?
Sorry not to be there for the Kyiv Security Forum, one of my favorite events. But we try next year again, and hopefully it works. So greetings to you all. Also good to see friends on the panel, so hi everyone. Now, on the question, it's not my place to speculate what Russia might or might not do. Our task is, of course, to take the threat seriously, and Russia has been identified as a threat in NATO strategic concept, in all the documents, internal documents, national documents, EU documents. It is a threat, so we take it seriously. And then the next task is to make sure that NATO, which has been successful in deterring various challenges and threats throughout the history of NATO, would be as successful in the future. NATO has never been attacked by anyone, by Soviets or Russia or anybody else, and that should stay that way. For that, we need 3 things. 1, invest in our own strength. Make sure that at the national level we make the decisions that are necessary. So here Latvia just approved the law granting 5% of GDP for defense, hard defense capabilities in the foreseeable future, so for the next few years. So investing in defense, making sure defense industry is in place across allies. Again, it's not just enough to have the cash itself. Then making sure we have that strength demonstrated. So it's not just a theoretical capability, but very practically demonstrated. Then have technological superiority. And again, there is work to be done on this one. Second big pillar is make sure the transatlantic relationship is strong. So, and here, avoid unnecessary commentary on commentary, don't go down some downward spiral, make sure that there's channels, comms channels, practical work, especially among the military, especially with politicians, obviously, but making sure that the unity as a center of gravity for NATO is there. So I'm glad that President Erdogan reached out to President Trump. The summit is being prepared in Ankara, and we will have a successful summit. And the third part in all this is, of course, support to Ukraine, making sure that Russia doesn't get its objectives, but also that Ukraine thrives as a democratic, successful state in the EU and eventually in NATO. So here, all the efforts from us at a national level, regional level, Nordic Baltic, Council of Baltic Sea States, meaning with Germans and Poles, but also wider efforts are what is needed. And indeed, that includes also weakening Russia. So I'm very happy that from one hand, we were able to agree on the 90 billion implementation. That was a political decision. Now the technical part is also solved. So it will go to Ukraine support, including 60 billion from that for military aid. But also in the same time, we approved the 20th sanctions package on Russia. And Russia is weakened. Russia is weakened daily and daily again. So that these all packages, these all pillars have to be in place, and that's what we are busy with. We are not sort of speculating what might do or might not do, making sure that we have everything in place.
Thank you, Minister. Admiral Bauer, if NATO deterrence isn't the thing to rely on right now, what is?
What is that question? Was if?
Oh, sorry, that was for Admiral Bauer, Minister.
If you allow me, Baiba.
Hi, Rob.
Hello. Yeah, so all the points Minister Braže made are absolutely spot on. I think we should add to the discussion societal resilience. I think on top of military capabilities and everything that we need to improve on, which is the capability targets for which we need the money. And of course, for that, we also need an industry that can actually produce what we want to buy, because that is still the problem. We are in year 5 of the war in Ukraine, and we are still trying to convince each other that that is necessary, which is idiotic. And that is not only the defense industry, but it is also the financial sector, it's the institutional investors, it is the private sector in general, it is the government. Everybody's sort of trying to convince each other whilst we are in a way where we need to prepare for war. So that is the one thing that I would like to add. The reason why Russia would actually attack, as you assume in your question, is when China asks Russia, because the decision for Russia to attack NATO is no longer being made in Moscow, as I'm convinced, but is actually made in Beijing. Russia is by now a vassal state of China, increasingly, because it is more and more dependent on what China is doing for Russia. If China was not helping Russia the way it is, Russia would not be able to continue the war against Ukraine. So this is very much connected to China. And therefore, we should not only talk about Russia, but we should also talk about China increasingly.
So, Tony, there you are. The industry case for the industry for defense is there. But it's not easy to get the money, is it?
Well, it definitely isn't easy to get the money in the UK, and we'll see how that progresses. But just to build on what the others have said, Russia isn't going to expand in the way that you set the question. Russia has embarked on a disastrous war, and we need to extol how disastrous that war has been. We need to extol our admiration for Ukraine and what it is doing for the whole of Europe. And we need to explain, and the explanation is critical for the likes of China and any other nation that blithely thinks that you might be able to be aggressive and that you might be able to take territory and that things might go according to plan and you might be able to achieve your ambitions. And in real life, it rarely works out like that. So Russia has embarked on this war, which has been disastrous at the strategic level. It's the opposite to what Putin wanted. He's got a stronger NATO. He has awoken NATO and Europe to start defending itself in a much stronger way. He's helped Europe and NATO to put across that it will deter Russia, and we don't make enough of last year's NATO Hague summit, which was extraordinary in that nations agreeing to nearly double their defense spending and to get to 3.5% on core security and defense and 5% overall. And then at the operational and tactical level, we need to tell the story of what Ukraine is achieving and how much we should be in awe, admiration and gratitude for what Ukraine is doing. And I think that helps to keep us safe. It helps us to reflect the extraordinary struggle of Ukraine, but it has wider impact around the globe, as the others have mentioned.
Tavi, so Tony's point is that this is a disastrous war in Ukraine, and from everything that we've been hearing about Russia's ambitions under President Putin, it puts more strain on other countries to be prepared.
Well, yes, it does. I actually want to start with what Sir Tony ended with, by being thankful to Ukraine to actually being the shield of Europe. In a strategic level, it is much wider than Russian aggression against Ukraine. It's Russian aggression against the democratic world. And Ukraine is fighting that for us. It was mentioned in the previous panel that Ukraine is not asking us and our sons to fight for them. They are only asking for weapons, tools to do it. And this is not much to be asked. And I'm really tired of hearing people saying that Ukraine should in some way be grateful. That's not the case. We should be grateful for Ukraine to fighting our war for the rest of the democratic world. Thank you. Yesterday, my good friend, the Estonian Defense Minister Hanno Pevkur, mentioned the Churchill's quote about giving us the tools. And if I calculated the GDP of NATO countries, or US and EU and UK, and 0.25%, that's how much Estonia is contributing from all those countries, would be $135 billion. And please don't tell me that some of those countries cannot afford that. We know from experience that this can be done, and this would be the very small check to pay to actually, help Ukraine to properly win this war. So in a way, answer to your question is in our hands. If we help Ukraine, if Ukraine keeps the shield of Europe, then there is no room for Russia to expand to other frontiers. Secondly, and I will make it very quick, despite the very troubling messages from across the ocean, the NATO that we see today is different from the NATO in 2014, and that's a good thing in a way as well. Especially, I remember from the Wales summit when we discussed, how difficult it is to get to 2% of GDP in defense expenditure, like you just mentioned. Today we are at 5, or not all of us are at 5, but we are aiming at 5 at least. So it's a different story. And let's keep in mind that this is the right way to do it. In NATO, the best we can do, in addition to supporting Ukraine, is to show our strength, and the only thing that Putin would be provoked by would be our weakness, and this we don't want to show him.
So the message is political will and societal resilience need to be maintained in Ukraine. How would you suggest that?
I would suggest to keep an inclusive approach to security and resilience. Rob mentioned briefly the need to have an approach to the whole of society and the resilience of the society. So when it comes to look into the inclusive approach of security, which is something I'm in charge of working both on the women, peace and security agenda and also the human security agenda, for me it means really looking at the society based on the Ukrainian experience that shows us how we need to work together, military and civilian, at the same time. But this also brings to unpacking this, which means including the gender perspectives when it comes to my responsibility. And just to build on what I said, that we have to be grateful to Ukraine, I would add that we have to be grateful to Ukrainian women in particular in this war, alongside with men, because women have proven to be a warfighter, have been proven to show resilience within the society in different roles, from the political leadership into community leaders. being part of defense industry, producing drones now, stepping up in covering different roles because the majority of men are still, on the front line. But that said, we know that number speaks alone because we have today more than 75,000, and I don't need to tell you, Ukraine, how many women are fighting today. And I had the privilege of spending the couple of the last days, with some of them becoming commanders and really sharing their own experience on the front line. And this is extremely important to maintain the resilience of the society together with a civilian preparedness. So if we look at what we need to do, I think it's look into this partnership between military and civilian, but also between the private and the public sectors, and look on the different role and different contribution that both men and women bring aligned. This is not only a question of upholding our democratic values. It is certainly one that differentiates us from our enemy. It is a question of equality, but it is especially a question of effectiveness. We are better when we work together, and we know that resilience has to be prepared before the crisis. It's not something that you can do only during the crisis. So it's about the political willingness to maintain our infrastructure, to maintain the fabric of the society together, and we will be able to do so only if we work together in synergy.
Thank you. How do we, moving on to the strategic ambiguity of America, how do we deal with that strategic ambiguity over the next 6 months? How does Ukraine deal with it? Yes, Admiral Bauer.
First, I would suggest that we look at what the Americans do versus what some Americans say, because there is a difference. If you, for example, listen to what is said, there's a lot of talk about troop reductions in Europe. There's no single military person moved out yet. If the US takes out the troops that they added to the European force in 2022, which was about 25,000 as a result of the war in Ukraine, if the US would take those numbers out, then actually nothing dramatic has happened. So we have to be careful to, let's say, react only to what is said. That is one. Second, there is a difference, of course. It is worrying what is being said. Don't get me wrong. It's not necessarily helpful what is being said and what is posted on a social media site as the official channel from the US government. That is worrying. So it's not necessarily helpful. But at the same time, we should keep a cool head, stay calm and carry on, as the Brits always say. Keep focusing on what is important when it comes to NATO. We should be careful in Europe to push away the Americans. It's not helpful. Yes, we should become stronger as Europeans inside NATO. That is absolutely necessary. Actually, that is agreed in the Hague Summit with the capability targets, because if we do what we have promised in the alliance, then European nations and Canada will have capabilities in the near future that now only the US has. And if we have that, then European nations and Canada can actually have a different stance towards the US when it comes to military power. And you will have a different debate. So let's do what we have promised. Stay on course when it comes to NATO. Don't break something that isn't broken yet. It's very careful. We should be careful to break something that isn't broken yet. So, and of course, we should talk to each other, and especially on the highest political level. I'm sure leaders are talking to the American president on whether it's helpful or not, etc., etc. But stay calm and carry on.
Is that right, Sir Tony? Stay calm and carry on. And actually, is it the media, is it us overplaying this for headlines?
So I think there is an element. It is a bit boring when the recipe is stay calm and carry on, and I think especially for the media. But just to build on what Rob has said, if you step back and you look at this, then there is remarkable agreement. There's an agreement in Europe that Europe has to take its own defence far more seriously and act on that. Act on that by applying more resource, by growing the production that will then draw on that additional resource. And that is exactly what President Trump is demanding of Europe, but it's also what previous presidents of America have demanded of Europe. And it's now much more sharply in focus. Some of that is the language, the character, the nature of the current US administration. But I also think for European leaders, it's the clarity of the war in Europe and what Ukraine is facing. So there's remarkable agreement there. And then I think that it has this wider resonance because, again, just to lift it, when you take NATO as a whole and over 50% of the world's GDP and these nations coming together to recognize that they need to spend more on defense and security, that is a hell of a message to Moscow, to Beijing, and it reflects a broader concern about the world. And I think especially from a military point of view, we all agree that the world's getting more dangerous. It's a more dangerous place. It's uncomfortable from a military point of view because our magazines are half empty. And we need to have full magazines, and we need to modernize what we've got. And in order to do that, that is an arsenal of democracy approach. It's not a European approach. It's a Western approach, binding with our alliance across the Atlantic into America, and binding with our other alliances with democracies around the world. And that's what I think you're seeing starting to happen. And that is how we respond to a more dangerous world.
Tavi, when we talk about alliances, so Tony was mentioning, Admiral Bauer was talking about Canada and Europe. Europe's obviously a large place and there are lots of different elements. How united is Europe and how ready is it to take on a different type of alliance?
Yeah, I think it's very good to be reminded that when we talk about transatlantic relations, it's not only US, and to be honest, it is frustrating to get some messages from US during the last months or so. But yes, I think having a strong alliance with Canada, of course, is important for Europe, and I'm very thankful for Canadians to being there for us, and we are there for them as well, of course. By the way, the messages by Canadian Prime Minister in Davos earlier this year, I think they resonated really well, and many in Europe listened very carefully what he had to say, and many agreed as well. Now, where I do agree with Donald Trump, and this I don't probably say quite often, is of course that Europe can and should do more. And again, I'm stating the obvious here. I think some European leaders, to be honest, still are a little bit like seeing Russia, in this form that is larger than life, whereas actually in Europe, many countries alone are a lot richer than Russia is. The GDP, not per capita, which all of Europe is richer per capita than Russia is, but as a whole, many countries are bigger, and this means that and European countries aren't alone. So together, and even if we are hesitating if US is supporting us or how much US is supporting us, even then, I think we can be strong enough. We definitely are big enough. We definitely are rich enough to support Ukraine to win and to defend ourselves. And of course, having said that, I'm a big fan of US as historic guarantee for European security. It's a big thing, and I hope that this will be the case in the future as well. But with or without them, we can support Ukraine, and we can win this war, and we can defend ourselves as well.
Minister Braže, how should we assess China's role in this war? Is it as a distant observer, a quiet enabler of Russia, or a potential driver of a broader geopolitical confrontation that could reshape the global order?
Depends on what angle do you look at, from what angle do you look at. If you look at purely military, I don't think there's any intel agency which has provided confident proof that China would be providing direct military assistance to Russia. So that probably is then true. However, when we look at everything that enables the war, so all types of dual use, all types of machinery, all types of tools, and so on and so forth, China is the biggest supplier to Russia. And when you look at the trade flows, indeed, that is what has taken place, that China is the biggest trading partner. But China is also the biggest trading partner for Ukraine, providing a lot of important stuff for Ukrainian drone and other industry. So there are different angles. When we look at the sanctions evasion, again, EU sanctions envoy has been quite clear that there is a lot of questions to be asked to China, to Hong Kong, to companies based there in the Far East, because again, it might not be directly, it might be enabling. So there are various angles to that. But in the same time, indeed, China has taken also positive steps by making sure that politically they have stated that territorial integrity is a principle that has to be respected, respect for borders, and so on and so forth. So the answer is not one-sided per se. Meanwhile, China has been developing its own military capabilities in a fast and convincing way, and they have not been transparent about why they are doing it, what are the threats they are addressing. Capabilities they have actually are quite power projecting capabilities, whether that's aircraft carriers, whether space and everything else. So it's not a very comfortable, I would say, situation overall. Having said that, I think the important part is to concentrate on the immediate steps for Ukraine and to make sure that Russia doesn't achieve its objectives, because all the intel agencies, all our various scenarios and discussions are quite clear that Russia's main objective is to subjugate Ukraine, to take full control of Ukraine in terms of political power, in terms of military solutions, in terms of future choices, and we should not be allowing that to happen. So we are fully committed to maintain our support, to make sure that EU's support is in place, that NATO's support is in place, political support internationally through, we are members of UN Security Council, elected ones, to make sure that both positive things that Ukraine has been doing as a democratic country, but also all the atrocities that Russia has been doing are internationally reflected, proven, and also that will restrict what policy choices China can have in that respect.
Thank you, Minister. So, Tony, we're focusing on Ukrainian unity and resolve, but is China helping sustain Russia?
China absolutely is helping to sustain Russia, and we need to call that out. We need to explain to China why that is bad for the global economy, why that is not a role that a China that portrays itself as wanting to be a responsible power, that actually it's supporting aggression, and that's what we're pushing back against with Ukraine's fight against Russia. And we also need to explain that this is a bigger fight in terms of values and stability for the whole world, and that we are going to sustain Ukraine in its struggle, and that is in our interest, that is in obviously in Ukraine's interest, but ultimately it's in China's interest as well. And we should also be really playing with Russia that, to the disaster that I mentioned before, that Russia is becoming a diminished power the more that it has to rely on China, and that the notion that China and Russia are somehow a natural partnership is absurd. They don't have the cultural history, they don't have the understanding, and Rob is right to say that this is a pathway for Russia to become a vassal state of China, and it needs to be another factor for why this has been a disastrous war for Putin.
Tavi, I saw you nodding there.
Yeah, I do agree a lot that has been said, so that's why I'm nodding.
And Rob, just to end, how do you deal with China?
Well, if I can come back to the theme of the conference, darkness or dawn and is light ahead. If we actually do what we have agreed in NATO, if we continue with the good plans that are going around in the EU, there is light ahead. Because actually what we will then see, if we continue to support Ukraine, Ukraine will remain a sovereign state, which is extremely important for all of us. Anchored in the West, extremely important for us. Russia is contained and is actually constrained. NATO is stronger than ever before. The EU emerges more politically coherent for the first time in many, many decades, and more powerful in order to actually put power behind its words. The public accepted the strategic competition as, let's say, the new normal. And so fatigue consists, but actually it hasn't led to disengagement. All these things is what we can achieve together if we do what we have promised, if we recognize there is a danger from Russia and China, and that we fight for our democracies in a way that is strengthening the armed forces, strengthening our societal resilience, and recognizing that it is not a given that someone else will solve our problems, but it is actually ourselves solving our problems.
Please join me in thanking the entire panel for shedding so much light on so many different parts of the world. Thank you all very much.